Chancellor Angela Merkel's management skills are touted as the key to her success. Her careful and steady style has served her, Germany and the EU well through countless crises. And it worked at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic too. Germany even played a major part in creating the first market-ready vaccine. But the EU hasn't rolled that vaccine out as fast as other places. Most of that happened under Merkel's watch at the helm of the EU presidency. So have Angela Merkel's legendary leadership qualities finally found their match in the pandemic? With just a few months to go as German Chancellor, will COVID rewrite Angela Merkel's legacy as the ultimate crisis manager? There's growing dissatisfaction with Germany's vaccine rollout. Critics argue this comes from Merkel's failure to think outside her long-established political toolbox, while other leaders threw out the rulebook altogether. When Merkel first addressed Germany over Corona in March 2020, she promised that her government would think on its feet.
Dies ist eine dynamische Situation und wir werden in ihr lernfähig bleiben, jederzeit umdenken und mit anderen Instrumenten reagieren zu können.
That crucial instrument to fight the pandemic arrived sooner and much closer to home than anyone had even dared to hope. On the 20th of November 2020, the American-German company Pfizer-BioNTech delivered the first vaccine ready for large-scale approval. And yet, despite the fact that the vaccine was developed by German scientists and much of it was being produced inside the EU, Europe fell painfully short of getting it to its people. Now, there are reasons for that. The countries that pulled ahead used innovative tactics to get the vaccine out as fast as possible. They issued fast-track approvals which required less data than the EU was asking for. They relieved pharmaceutical companies from all liability. Israel exchanged patient data for more vaccine. And the United States saw a presidential order from then US President Donald Trump essentially banning exports until all Americans had had their jab. Instead, EU countries agreed on a common approach to approving the vaccine using the European Medicines Agency. It's the European way based on consensus. The aim was to bundle buying power, but also to avoid countries going it alone. That could lead to a bidding war between the richer and the poorer EU countries. Many feared such vaccine nationalism could tear the bloc apart. While there was pressure to act faster, DW has learned that no one around the table in Brussels suggested a drastic step overriding EU rules. Instead, Angela Merkel, by then at the helm of the EU presidency, stuck to EU procedure. In the meantime, the EU was bleeding jobs and income. A major injection of cash was needed. Here, Angela Merkel did drastically change course. The joint announcement with Emmanuel Macron that governments wouldn't have to pay back some 500 billion in EU rescue funds was hailed as a triumph of European solidarity. But this was an economic sticking plaster. Vaccines remained the only real ticket out of this crisis, and on that the EU had dropped the ball.
Wir waren spät dran bei der Zulassung. Wir waren zu optimistisch bei der Massenproduktion und vielleicht waren wir uns auch zu sicher, dass das Bestellte tatsächlich pünktlich geliefert wird. Wir müssen uns fragen, warum das so ist und welche Lehren wir daraus ziehen können.
Merkel's mighty leadership is rarely questioned. Her image as the ultimate crisis buster is virtually untouchable. This pandemic is threatening all of that. 1 year into the crisis, she had to admit that she failed to meet Germans' expectations to get those vaccines, if not first, at least fast.
Ich will gar nicht drum herum reden. Es gibt eine Enttäuschung Und vielleicht hat diese Enttäuschung etwas damit zu tun, dass ich es erstmal faszinierend fand, dass wir überhaupt einen Impfstoff haben nach weniger als einem Jahr. Das ist eine Riesenleistung, damit konnte man nicht rechnen.
Other countries like Israel and Britain simply improvised rather than following a fixed procedure. They got going with their vaccine rollouts and they were leaping ahead. Germany's leading opposition party was furious that the government had simply let Brussels take over.
Die schnelle Impfung großer Teile der Bevölkerung, die sie ebenfalls zur Zielgröße erklärt haben, hat ihre Regierung grandios versiebt, weil sie die Zuständigkeit, Unterbrechung des Subsidiaritätsprinzips nach Brüssel delegiert haben.
Germany had successfully flattened the curve of the first wave of the pandemic with a partial but disciplined lockdown. The second lockdown came too late to take the edge off the second wave. More people would die in a week than during the entire first wave. Virus variants began to arrive from Britain, South Africa and Brazil. They were often more transmissible than the original virus, making a mockery of lockdown and hygiene measures.
Der Grundsatz, wir bleiben zu Hause, bleibt das wesentliche Instrument im Kampf gegen die Pandemie. Zitat Ende. Wirklich? Auch nach einem Jahr noch? Trotz allem, was wir gelernt haben? Hangeln wir uns seit Oktober, November von einem Lockdown, von einem Gipfel zum nächsten, ohne eine klare Perspektive? Das ist bestenfalls einfallslos. Mit Sicherheit, Frau Merkel, ist das nicht alternativlos.
Angela Merkel is now under pressure to do something different. Lockdown fatigue is growing in Germany and across the European Union. European politicians and diplomats have told me that when she walks into the room full of leaders in Brussels, all eyes turn on her. Everybody, including those who disagree with her, want to know what she thinks and what she's planning to do next. The fear is now that Merkel, Germany and the EU may stick to the procedures on vaccine approval, purchasing and distribution, even in the face of a second vaccine challenge, this time against the new variants. And this may prove to be yet another mistake.
We cannot afford to run into these problems a second time when we address the second vaccine challenge here, because that will not be the only opportunity for us to come with a vaccine. We have to use booster shots, so we will have new waves of vaccinations. We have to become much quicker in Europe than we are currently. We have to get better.
Angela Merkel's leadership reputation is built on her ability to think things through to the end and her insistence on doing just that before deciding what she's going to do. Yet with the pandemic, other leaders took risks, they broke rules and they abandoned principles of solidarity. Merkel suddenly seemed less strong and decisive and more hesitant and rules-bound. So just a couple of months before she departs as German Chancellor, her legacy seems strangely open.